Ninja Theory is one of those studios whose story feels almost as dramatic as the games it makes. Based in Cambridge, England, the developer became known for stylish action games, cinematic presentation, and a willingness to take risks that bigger studios often avoid. Its name is attached to titles like Heavenly Sword, Enslaved, Odyssey to the West, DMC, Devil May Cry, and most famously the Hellblade series. But behind that portfolio is a pattern of ambition meeting financial danger. Again and again, Ninja Theory chased high-end production values without the safety net usually required to make them. The studio survived buyouts, bankruptcy threats, controversial creative choices, and changing ownership. Its history is not just about games, it is about the cost of trying to make premium, emotionally intense experiences in an industry that often rewards safer bets. The company began in March 2000, founded by Tamim Antoniada, Nina Christensen, and Mike Ball. At first, it was not called Ninja Theory. It operated under the name Just Add Monsters, a title that sounds playful, but the team's ambitions were serious from the start. The British games industry had produced many inventive studios, yet surviving as an independent developer was difficult. Developers often relied on publishers for funding, and that meant creative ideas had to fit business expectations. Just Add Monsters quickly became connected to Argonaut Games, a better-known company that acquired the studio soon after its founding. That acquisition gave the young team a route into console development, but it also tied its fate to the health of a larger company. The studio's first major release was Kung Fu Chaos for the original Xbox. It was a comedic, chaotic fighting party game inspired by martial arts cinema, built around exaggerated characters, slapstick action, and fast arena battles. In hindsight, Kung Fu Chaos shows an early version of what Ninja Theory would keep returning to: physical performance, expressive animation, and a desire to make action feel theatrical. But it did not turn the developer into a household name. The game arrived in a competitive console market, and quirky exclusives could easily disappear if they did not become instant hits. More importantly, trouble was brewing around Argonaut Games. When Argonaut later collapsed into liquidation, Just Add Monsters had to fight for its independence and buy itself out from administrators. After separating from Argonaut, the studio adopted the name Ninja Theory. But independence did not mean stability. The team had talent and ambition, yet it lacked the resources needed to build the kind of cinematic action games it imagined. This is where Sony Computer Entertainment became crucial. Sony funded the development of Heavenly Sword, a PlayStation 3 exclusive that gave Ninja Theory a chance to work at the top end of console production. Heavenly Sword was expensive, visually impressive, and built around the warrior Nariko, with combat designed to feel sweeping and dramatic. For Ninja Theory, it was a rescue line. Without that funding, the studio may not have survived. But the same deal that saved it also exposed it to the harsh realities of publisher-backed development. Heavenly Sword became an important showcase for early PlayStation 3 visuals, but its sales were not strong enough to secure the future Ninja Theory had hoped for. The consequences were severe. Because of contractual agreements with Sony, the studio lost its in-house technologies after the project. That meant years of technical investment could not simply carry forward into the next game. For a developer, technology is more than code. It is workflow, institutional knowledge, tools, and the foundation that makes future projects faster and cheaper. Losing that base placed Ninja Theory in a painful position. The team had delivered a major exclusive, but instead of gaining long-term security, it had to rebuild. Heavenly Sword raised the studio's profile while also demonstrating how vulnerable a developer could be when it did not own the infrastructure behind its work. Ninja Theory's next major project was Enslaved, Odyssey to the West, developed with publisher support and in collaboration with writer Alex Garland. The game reimagined the classic Journey to the West framework in a post-apocalyptic world, focusing on the uneasy partnership between Monkey and Trip. Compared with many action games of its era, Enslaved placed unusual emphasis on character chemistry, performance capture, and emotional storytelling. It had color at a time when many big action games favored gray and brown palettes. It had a human core beneath its spectacle. Critics often praised its world and characters, but commercially it underperformed. Once again, Ninja Theory had made something distinctive and memorable, but not profitable enough to remove the financial pressure surrounding the studio. Then came one of the most controversial opportunities of the studio's career, DMC, Devil May Cry. Capcom brought Ninja Theory in to reboot the beloved Devil May Cry series, a franchise with a passionate fan base and a highly recognizable protagonist in Dante. Reboots are always risky, but this one was especially sensitive because it changed the tone, look, and characterization of a series many players considered iconic. The game itself received praise for its combat flow, visual style, and accessibility, and many critics saw it as a successful action game on its own terms. But parts of the fan base objected to its story choices and interpretation of returning characters. For Ninja Theory, DMC showed both the power and danger of working on someone else's famous property. It could bring visibility, but also intense scrutiny. After DMC, Ninja Theory faced a strategic crossroads. Its major publisher-backed games had earned attention, but not the consistent sales needed to guarantee independence. The studio began diversifying, taking on contract work while also searching for a more sustainable creative model. This mattered because the traditional AAA structure was becoming increasingly difficult for mid-sized independent developers. Big-budget games required large teams, long timelines, and enormous marketing support. Without publisher ownership or a blockbuster franchise, a studio could spend years making one game and still end up in danger if sales missed expectations. Ninja Theory needed a way to keep the cinematic quality it valued while reducing the financial exposure that had repeatedly threatened its survival. That search led to the idea that would redefine the studio. The answer was Hellblade, Senua's Sacrifice, developed by a small team as Ninja Theory's first self-published title. The studio called its approach independent AAA. The idea was to make a game with the presentation values associated with major releases, but on a smaller budget, with tighter scope and direct control. Instead of building a huge open world or chasing every mainstream feature, Hellblade focused intensely on one character, one journey, and one psychological theme, psychosis. Senua's experience was not treated as a gimmick, but as the center of the game's design, soundscape, narrative, and performance. This approach allowed the studio to turn limitation into identity. By narrowing the game's focus, Ninja Theory could make it feel polished and powerful without needing the budget of a massive publisher blockbuster. Hellblade became the breakthrough Ninja Theory had been chasing for years. It was both a critical and commercial success, proving that players would support a smaller premium game if it offered a distinct experience with high production values. The game's use of binaural audio, intimate performance, and psychological horror created something that stood apart from standard action-adventure releases. Its success also changed how people talked about scale in games. Hellblade suggested there was space between tiny indie projects and enormous AAA franchises, a middle path where a skilled team could make something visually impressive, emotionally focused, and financially viable. For Ninja Theory, it was validation after years of near misses. The studio had finally built a model around its strengths instead of forcing itself into someone else's structure. In 2018, Microsoft acquired Ninja Theory and brought it under the Xbox Game Studios umbrella. On paper, this seemed to solve the studio's long-running problem, financial insecurity. As a first-party developer, Ninja Theory could access platform holder resources while continuing to build ambitious projects. But acquisitions also change expectations. A studio that once survived by controlling costs and self-publishing now became part of a larger corporate strategy around subscriptions, exclusives, and ecosystem value. During this period, Ninja Theory released Bleeding Edge in 2020, a multiplayer title that stood apart from the studio's reputation for narrative action. The game did not become a major long-term success, but it showed Microsoft-era Ninja Theory experimenting beyond Hellblade, even as audiences increasingly associated the studio with Senua's story. Senua's Saga, Hellblade 2 arrived in 2024 as the long-awaited sequel to Senua's Sacrifice. It carried enormous expectations, partly because the first game had become a symbol of Ninja Theory's identity, and partly because the sequel was tied to Xbox's first-party ambitions. Hellblade 2 pushed visual fidelity, performance capture, and atmosphere even further, presenting itself less as a conventional action sequel and more as an immersive psychological and cinematic experience. That focus was consistent with Ninja Theory's history. The studio has often prioritized mood, character, and presentation over broad mechanical scale. But the sequel also existed in a very different industry environment, one where even acclaimed games could face questions about budgets, subscriptions, player numbers, and corporate priorities. According to the provided article, Xbox parted ways with Ninja Theory in June 2026, selling the studio to a new investor while allowing it to finish its current project, a third Hellblade game titled Senua, planned for 2027 and published by Xbox Game Studios. If taken as part of the studio's ongoing story, that development fits a familiar pattern. Ninja Theory has repeatedly moved between independence, publisher backing, acquisition, and reinvention. The key question is whether the studio can preserve the creative intensity that made Hellblade matter while finding a stable business structure around it. Its history shows a developer willing to bet everything on emotionally driven, technically polished games. Ninja Theory's legacy is not simply survival, it is the pursuit of a difficult middle ground between arthouse focus and blockbuster craft. If you found this helpful, please like this video and subscribe for more explainers.